It can be devastating to learn that you have a rotator cuff tear. Not only is it painful, but it has a huge impact on your life, and the treatments are frankly pretty scary. Having surgery is nobody's idea of a good time. So on today's video, I'm going to share with you the top 6 things that you need to know if you have recently been diagnosed with a rotator cuff tear, as well as my top 2 tips for managing this problem. Thanks for joining me. Let's dive right in. If you don't already know, the rotator cuff is a set of 4 small but super important muscles that help stabilize your shoulder joint. Basically, they keep the 2 bones of your shoulder joint together as you move through your range of motion, which is tremendous. It allows for great shoulder range of motion, but it means all of that stability depends upon those 4 muscles working together. Now, there is a fundamental problem with the rotator cuff, and that is it does not have the best blood supply, particularly in certain places, and those tendons are very vulnerable to tearing and rupture. When that happens, the shoulder is painful, it's weak, and we lose that important shoulder stability, and so doing things with our arm and shoulder becomes very difficult. So if you've been diagnosed with a rotator cuff tear, here are the things you need to know. Imaging is required to truly diagnose this. Clinical signs that we as physical therapists and physicians would use include weakness in your shoulder, pain in certain areas, and positive results on certain orthopedic tests. Without getting too into the weeds, all of those things only suggest the presence of a tear. It has to be confirmed with imaging. So unless you've had imaging, I would treat your tear as suspicious rather than confirmed, and I would go ahead and try to rehab it. The second thing is, in rotator cuff tears, size matters. The smaller the tear, the better the prognosis, and the more likely you are to avoid surgery and to be able to manage it without doing that kind of intervention, just with exercise, rehab, and other management tools. The bigger the tear, the more problematic and the more likely you are going to have to need to do something. So it is important for you to try to assess that as best you can with your physician. Your health matters. If you are a smoker, if you are inactive, if you have a sedentary lifestyle, if you don't eat well, if you're not sleeping well, all of those things, especially smoking, contribute to a worse prognosis for your shoulder recovering on its own. It is never too late to make a positive change in your health and wellness. If your shoulder pain is the trigger that you need to change some fundamental habits like quitting smoking and vaping, that may be a silver lining on what is a painful problem. Age matters. We know that as we get older, the blood supply diminishes to those tissues and the degeneration can become more extensive. And so in my older clients, I may not be able to rehab them as successfully as my younger clients simply because of age. That's a bummer, but it's something you should know. It's hard to say what that cutoff is because everyone ages differently. Does that mean if you're over 45 or 50, you're out of luck? No, I don't believe that it does. All of these variables work together. And so if you are a healthy 70 or even 80-year-old, you might go into your doctor and your doctor says, you know, I don't want to do surgery. I just want you to do rehab for your shoulder because you're so healthy. So don't worry, age isn't something you can change, but you can modify your health and other behaviors and you can do the rehab. Speaking of rehab, if you're new to the channel, my name is Burke. I'm a sports physical therapist in private practice, and I'm also a contract therapist with USA Cycling. I love sports medicine and orthopedics and helping people just like you navigate problems with how your body works. Thank you for coming. Consider subscribing if you find this information helpful. And let's jump right back in. How you use your shoulder matters. If you are someone who's very active, who does a lot with your shoulders, you exercise, you play golf, you garden, you're doing projects around the house, whatever it is, then you are more likely on both ends to, number one, have a healthier shoulder in general, and number two, maybe be eligible for more aggressive management because you need your shoulder. If you are someone that is very sedentary, if you like to read, if you're doing things in your lap like knitting or crocheting, the demands on your shoulder are not as high, and so you may or may not get away with having to do less for your shoulder as long as you can get it comfortable. Now, the last thing to know before we get into my top 2 suggestions for helping you manage this is that this problem is both a pain problem and a functional problem, meaning it hurts and it also changes how your shoulder moves and how your muscles work together. And so I have found it's important that we treat both of those. I have seen patients over the years who have successfully gotten their pain under control, but they haven't really strengthened their shoulder, and that's led to them having this problem come back or even worsen. So my 2 suggestions have to do with that last point. First is how you treat the pain. Motion is a powerful analgesic. That means it reduces pain. Just moving your shoulder as often throughout the day as you can with no extra load, just your arm alone. You can do pendulum arm swings, you can do other movements. By the way, if you need ideas for how to get your shoulder moving, I'm going to leave a link to a video that I made on just that in the description below. Another tool patients use successfully to treat shoulder pain is contrast hot and cold. If you are new to contrast, you can get a hot water bottle, you can get an electric hot pack, you can get a microwavable hot pack, and apply that for anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, followed by cold, followed by heat, followed by cold, anywhere from 2 to 4 cycles. Protect your skin. Now, very helpful for treating pain are hands-on techniques. Hands-on techniques done by a highly skilled and trained professional might include things like deep tissue massage, joint mobilizations or manipulations, acupuncture and trigger point dry needling, and all of those can help a ton to reduce pain in your shoulder. And lastly, for treating pain, medication plays a role, but I don't recommend you use that as your only means of pain management. Try these other tips as well. Motion in particular is extremely powerful, so don't be afraid to start moving your shoulder. In fact, you must move it to keep other problems from happening like frozen shoulder. Try motion as an analgesic pain reliever, not just medicine. I have 3 more tips for you on how to treat this functionally. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found something here that was helpful and that's going to maybe influence how you manage your shoulder. Always appreciate your comments and stories if you leave them below. Let's jump into the last tip, and this is how do you treat your shoulder functionally to restore its normal movement. Number 1 by a mile is stabilize your shoulder with exercises. When you look on the internet for rotator cuff exercises, you're going to see a whole list of things. I've in fact compiled a few of my favorites in another video, which I'll also leave in the link down below. But the purpose of all of those exercises for a rotator cuff tear is to stabilize that joint. And the stability of the joint prevents it from gliding around too much and becoming worse and staying painful. So your goal when you do exercises isn't just that you're doing them to try to build some isolated strength. You're trying to build strength in order to do something in your shoulder, and that is make your shoulder more stable. So if you think about it that way, that means you're going to choose things that are going to create more dynamic tension around your shoulder. Things like leaning on your hands and shifting your weight from side to side on a countertop is an example of a stability exercise. We don't just want to do the classic internal and external rotation with a band. We want to do things that are really going to affect how stable your shoulder is. Number 2, avoid heavy lifts, especially with your arm outstretched at a vulnerable angle or in the extremes of motion, either way overhead or behind you or way out to the side. That tissue needs to not be totally blown up and disturbed. So avoid heavy lifting or high force activities, especially with a long lever. This arm is a long lever. And my last tip is for those of you who find that when you sleep, you're rolling onto that shoulder or you're catching yourself waking up with that arm overhead. All of those positions by themselves are not big issues, but when you combine a position like that with the hours that you might be asleep, then that can become a real problem. So monitor how you're sleeping. Try to use pillows to prop yourself in a more comfortable position if you can. And I, believe it or not, have even had patients use little bits of string to tie their thumb to their waist or do different strategies to really prevent them from doing something when they're sleeping that's not good for their shoulder. Now, this is not every tip or suggestion for managing shoulders. It is a complex joint, and there are many possible roads to a successful outcome. But these are a few of my go-tos. These are true over and over again with my patients. So again, thanks for coming. I hope you found something useful here, and I look forward to seeing you next time.